It's very windy here today, but the weather is much better for our work on improving the walls and creating new openings on this side of the house. But at the end of last week, the weather forecast was for a lot of rain, and at the beginning of this week, that is exactly what arrived. So to start with, our work on the walls was all indoors, but as the weather has improved, we've been able to do more work outside. And to continue to transform the way the house looks from the outside, opening up new views from the inside and bringing some very welcome light to certain spaces. But when I arrived on Monday morning, I had needed some light from my car to see where I was going outside. And then some mobile phone torchlight to see where I was going when I was inside. And when Haggy and Miguel arrived, their first focus was on power and then lights inside. And then, having started preparations in this space last week, they then got set up to work on a new opening starting from the inside. I spoke with the architect to confirm a meeting that morning. And Haggy was getting set up for some work upstairs later on. Which we then discussed with Enric and Tony the Technico. By mid-morning, it was pretty clear the weather was not going to get better. And that the back wall drain was also going to need some clearing. And with the scaffolding and props in place and the measures checked with the laser, Haggy and Miguel started their work on the new opening. First, creating space at the top for the new middle and interior beams. And with the beams in place, they started to fill the space above and between them with mortar and stone. Towards the end of the day, thinking the rain was slightly lighter, I headed outside to try and repair part of the well hose pipe which had got a bit bent and twisted. The next morning was darker, windier and wetter than the first. And I'm not sure Fodo could have been too happy to be back on site, especially as he was now back on mortar duty in the rain. But he was soon back inside to help with some more scaffolding that Haggy now needed for the work that he would be doing on the wall above the old stairs, while Miguel would continue working on the new opening downstairs. This was part of the wall that we took down during the roof work, and we had left the final clearance and repair work for a rainy day, which this definitely was. After my rubble shifting warm-up, I briefly braved the rain outside for repairs to the tent, before heading back inside to follow progress on the 2 wall areas where Miguel was adding stones above the beams and Haggy had now got onto the repair work stage. It's not often that I come to the car in the middle of the day, but I was getting a little bit cold standing around indoors. So I've come to the car for a bit of heating up, and then I'll go back in a few minutes. With the stones above the beam now in place, Miguel started work on removing the stones below the beam, while Fodo continued his mortar supply line to Haggy upstairs. Hey.
what? I survive what? Survive when you come. Ini dalam tamu dalam apa kamu? Hapus.
After some more rain overnight, day 3 thankfully started a bit clearer and drier. And when the team arrived, they were able to start work outside again, which somewhat ironically meant that they now needed more water in the biodon and deposit for Fodo's mortar mixing. As Miguel continued work on the new side opening, and Haggy returned to the front wall and the opening up above he started work on last week, while my next task was pencil sharpening for Miguel. And quite early on, the sun made a very welcome return. I was briefly writing emails in my outdoor office, before the team's mid-morning break, when I headed to town for a part to better repair the well's hosepipe. And I was back in time to see the outdoor beam going into the new opening. Before putting in the new hosepipe connector. And then following the team's work, including a slightly unusual task for Fodo. With his hat back in place, Haggy finished the outdoor work on his window and headed inside to open up the wall from that side.
Esta guárdala para mañana y que fuera ya y ahora.
With rain back in the air, the poncho was back in action on day 4, but I was hoping it wouldn't be needed for too long. And by the time the team arrived, there wasn't much more rain. So we could continue with the work on the openings. Once some indoor scaffolding had been removed to make working from upstairs a bit easier. With work on the openings progressing, I now needed to do some indoor prep work on the upper side wall so that the team could more easily remove brickwork and repair necessary parts in the next few days. With the main aim being the removal of the double doors, ideally while still in their frame. After the mid-morning break, I was still working on the door, which was taking me a lot longer than these clips might suggest. Some more tidying was required by the sidewall, where we wanted to separate the better stones that had come out of the wall, not least because there would be more rubble down here shortly.
Ano yun, mama? Tamagin ako.
Vale, mañana, Miguel. With the team finished for the day, for my last hour on site, I now had the chance to remove some of the rubble from upstairs, which we want to make use of in the area outside the front door. The last morning of the week was much brighter and much breezier. And after opening up, I returned to the rubble from the night before for a bit of smoothing before the team arrived. And once the team was set up, Fodo started his mortar mixing, while Miguel and Hagi returned to work on the edges of the opening. With the opening work going well, I climbed the scaffolding to chip out some of the old mortar from stones in the original wall. and then headed back down to the tent where further repairs were now required after the rain and then the wind. With the edges of the opening complete, the team adjusted the scaffolding for work higher up the wall. And then they started to chip out sections of both the older and more modern bricks, which we would be replacing with stones. And with a sufficient level of bricks removed, the rest of the day was spent rebuilding the wall with stones. And that is the end of work for this week, which had threatened to be a bit of a washout, with this area in danger of becoming a bit of a mud bath. But thankfully we have been able to make pretty good progress, with Hagi finishing off the edges and opening up the window above, and then with Miguel rebuilding this wall up after we put the new beams in for the new wider window. While the surface in this area has changed a few times, providing a slightly easier access to the front door and salon, where scaffolding has gone up and then down as Hagi worked on repairing the wall above the old stairs, removing the last remaining parts that were down here, and then very skillfully rebuilding this edge with a series of new cornerstones. While the floor in this area has seen rubble added, removed, and then added again. And we started the work on this final wall, both from the inside and today from the outside, for some hopefully big final changes next week. So please do tune in again to see how we get on.